Good morning. If I could welcome everyone to GW's campus. Since there are a few new faces here, just to quickly introduce myself. My name's Frank Cilluffo. I display varying degrees of ignorance in lots of subjects, and I direct our center here for cyber and homeland security. You're in for a real treat today. I had an opportunity to sit down with Mr. Taniwaki earlier, and you've got not only a subject matter expert and a wonk, but you have someone who brings passion to many of those issues. And clearly, when we think about our strongest partners, when we think about who our allies are in the cyber domain, Japan is at the very top of that list. And while there's a lot of exciting activity ongoing already from a bilat perspective specific to cyber, I think that you're going to see even more in the days ahead, in large part because they've got, they live in a tough neighborhood, and we share a common risk in the neighborhood, but they're also just a great partner and have some huge technical skills that they can bring to the fight, and will undoubtedly do so. So just to very briefly introduce our speaker, Mr. Taniwaki is the Director General for Information Security at the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. He came to that role prior to becoming the Director General a few months ago as the Deputy Director of NISC, which is the operational arm of the cyber response community in Japan. So here you have someone, and before that, he ran policy planning and was also an economics counselor and attaché here in Washington in 2002 to about 2005, if I'm not mistaken. So this is someone who's actually, those of us in the policy community, we're known for coming up with big ideas. We normally don't have to implement those ideas. This is someone who's had to come up with those big ideas, implement those big ideas, and now oversee all the various initiatives around cybersecurity. So he'll talk to us today about Japan's cybersecurity strategy, its priorities going forward, where it stands. Obviously, he'll touch on Olympics planning efforts, and I know some of you are working on that in this audience, like Barbara and the recent MOU with MITRE had signed with Japan on those efforts. But also to discuss IoT. When you start thinking about physical and cyber convergence, the Internet of Things is at the very top of the list. When you think about autonomous vehicles, when you think about autos in general, Japan's at the top of that list. So obviously where these issues start coming together, I think they're incredibly important policy questions that transcend borders, and something we want to work with Japan on. And then last but not least, I know you will not be able to escape today without some discussion on the heated activity, very concerning activity coming out of Pyongyang these days, and what the cyber component of that could be. So, Taniwaki-san, thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours. Please join me here. So, please welcome.
So thank you very much, Frank-san, for your kind introduction, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to have this opportunity to introduce the trend of Japan's cybersecurity policy. As you are aware, threats in cyberspace have been rapidly becoming complicated and sophisticated. Frequent cyber attacks against government agencies and the critical infrastructure are occurring. The private sector has been often suffering from thefts of personal information, the obstruction or destruction of systems, and ransomware to obtain money illegally. Japan is no exception. Yes. Well, current cyber attacks have three features. That is, an increase in severe risks, the quick dissemination of risks, and the globalization of risks. First, I would like to explain the recent increase in severe risks. According to data given by NISC, or National Information Security Center, under the Cabinet Secretariat, there have been more than 7 million cases of suspicious communications against government agencies in fiscal 2016. This means that the suspicious communications has been detected every 4.4 seconds. From the perspective of the dissemination of risks, I must point out that the range of cyber threats is rapidly expanding under the circumstances where the adoption of connected cars, smart meters for the electric power industry, and IoT is making progress in society in addition to personal computers and smartphones. The globalization of risks is progressing as well. Cyber attacks against critical infrastructure, in particular, are occurring all over the world. There is a fear that the number of DDoS attacks taking advantage of botnet will further increase. As a result, the negative impact of cyber attacks on socioeconomic activities is expected to increase more. Well, under these circumstances, the Cybersecurity Basic Act came into effect in January 2015. The Cybersecurity Strategic Headquarters, chaired by the Chief Cabinet Secretary, was established. NISC serves as its secretariat, and the framework has been established to formulate and promote the government-wide cybersecurity strategy. Under the new cybersecurity framework, the clear legal authority was granted to NISC. Since then, NISC has been responsible for operating the GSOC, or Government Security Operations Center, to monitor the internet connection of the information systems of all the government agencies on 24/7 basis, and analyze malware, if any, auditing the security measures of the information systems of government agencies, investigating serious incidents, and providing recommendations to each government agency if its security measures are deemed insufficient. Well, another crucial point of the new cybersecurity system is that the Cybersecurity Basic Act stipulates the close collaboration between the Cybersecurity Strategic Headquarters and the National Security Council. The extreme importance of cyberspace defense was clarified for the first time in Japan in the National Security Strategy as a cabinet decision in December 2013. With an increase in cyber threats after that, Japan's cybersecurity policy has been becoming more important from the viewpoint of ensuring national security. Well, next, I would like to introduce the collaboration between NISC and the relevant ministry, including MIC. As I mentioned earlier, NISC has been acting as a government-wide coordinator in handling cyber attacks and coordinating related policies concerning centering on the formulation and the promotion of the cybersecurity strategy. Ministries concerned, including MIC, have been promoting each specific concrete measures based on the cybersecurity strategy. The Cabinet decided on Japan's cybersecurity strategy in September 2015 on the basis of the Cybersecurity Basic Act. This strategy focuses on 3 items. The one is promoting security investment in the private sector. The second thing is improving the defense capability of each sector. And third thing is reinforcing international partnership. These are as the 3 key measures, and advancing the research and development and promoting human resource development as cross-sectional measures to support these measures. This strategy outlines Japan's challenges in the cybersecurity policy area for the next 3 years with the aim of achieving results in 2020. As you know, this is the year of the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games, and indicates 3 basic points of the cybersecurity policy, that is proactive, acting as a catalyst, and envisaging cyber-physical space. Industrial promotion through the securement of cybersecurity is listed as the first pillar of the 3 main key measures of the strategy. This pillar demands top executives change in the way of thinking, in particular to take cybersecurity measures as an investment necessary to raise the corporate value of their companies, and not as a matter that requires a cost. Specifically, while IoT application is making progress in the entire society of Japan, the pillar under the basic principle of security by design demands 3 points. That is, ensuring the security of IoT systems, encouraging each company's reporting on cybersecurity measures, and promoting information sharing beyond the boundaries of public and private sectors. The second pillar is the reinforcement of Japan's defense capability. It includes the promotion of information sharing on software vulnerability, a constant review of the scope of critical information infrastructure protection, a CIIP for short, along with the reinforcement of CIIP measures and improvements in cybersecurity measures for government bodies. A cyber attack incident targeting the Japan Pension Service, a public institution, took place in May 2015, which resulted in the leakage of personally identifiable information on 1.25 million individuals. The case in particular reminded private enterprises as well as government agencies of the importance of cybersecurity measures. The pillar demands further strengthened measures in response to a rise in public awareness of the importance of cybersecurity measures. The third pillar is improvements in international cooperation. Cyberspace has no borders. In order to strengthen the defense system of each country, it is necessary to improve and strengthen international information sharing and joint coping mechanisms at various levels. Specifically, the pillar aims at promoting bilateral and multilateral policy consultations, clarifying the application of international law to cyberspace, and actively contributing to human resource development in developing countries. We consider that Japan's close collaboration with the United States as an alliance has the highest priority, and that it is important to actualize and reinforce the framework of US-Japan collaboration by continuing various policy dialogues, including US-Japan policy dialogue on the internet economy. In promoting the measures of these 3 pillars, it is an urgent task to strengthen Japan's research and development capabilities in the cybersecurity field and to establish a system for human resource deployment. The 2020 Tokyo Games will open in less than 3 years. Japan is required to make maximum efforts to develop human resources in the government sector and the private sector. It has passed approximately 2 years since the formulation of the cybersecurity strategy with the mentioned content, during which various efforts to strengthen cybersecurity have been promoted, including MIC measures, which I will introduce later. Evaluating various efforts that have been made and considering the revision of the cybersecurity strategy to be expected in the summer of 2018, next year. In July of this year, the Cybersecurity Strategic Headquarters made and released a mid-term review on Cybersecurity Strategy 2015 that presents priority measures to be promoted within the next 1 year. This review summarizes 3 points to be accelerated and reinforced. That is, the acceleration of system development for the 2020 Tokyo Games, the construction of an information sharing and collaboration network beyond the boundaries of the public and private sectors, and the promotion of bot cleansing measures. From the viewpoint of promoting countermeasures against bots, MIC is formulating comprehensive IoT security measures which will be open to the public next month. Bot cleansing measures are a particularly important policy issue. The DDoS attack against Dyn in October last year once again raised the importance of IoT security measures. In the future, the number of IoT devices will increase exponentially, and it is expected to reach 30 billion units worldwide in 2020. Under the circumstances, the public and private sectors need to cooperate and promptly undertake IoT security measures. In the government's new growth strategy determined in June this year, the realization of a data-driven society is a major policy issue. It is essential to realize the fundamental reform of the socio-economic systems by positioning various data as a resource for growth, reconstructing existing business areas and creating a new growth business area. Through the fourth industrial revolution, Japan is faced with rapid aging and declining birth rate, lack of labor force. In particular, will advance ahead of the world in future. Under the circumstances, we are strongly required to promote the resolution of social problems by big data analysis using IoT and AI, artificial intelligence, and find a new growth path through improvement of productivity, for which the security of IoT system is important. The National Institute of Information and Communication Technology, or NICT, is a national research and development corporation related to our ministry, MIC. NICT constructed a darknet called NICTER, composed of 300,000 unused IP addresses, and has been observing the situation of cyber attacks in real time and analyzing attack methods based on attack data. The number of attacks observed in 2016 was 128.1 billion, which was a 2.4 time increase year on year. Furthermore, attacks targeting IoT devices increased 5.8 times in the same period. The breakdown of 128.1 billion cyber attacks shows that the number of attacks targeting IoT devices accounted for 64% of the total. It is obvious that IoT security measures are an urgent issue to be addressed immediately. The biggest feature of IoT systems is that various IoT systems are interconnected to form a huge system of systems. For this reason, it is necessary to deal with systemic risks where a risk of one IoT system spreads to other IoT systems connected to it. So each individual IoT system consists of 4 layers from the bottom to the top as shown in the slide. The device layer, that includes sensors and actuators installed in real space, exists on the bottom, followed by the network layer that transmits data collected by the terminal, the platform layer that aggregates and accumulates data and coordinates each other data, and the service layer created by such data linkage. There are various items to be considered in each layer from the viewpoint of security measures. For example, it is important to ensure the authenticity of data in the service layer, and in the platform layer, how to absorb the differences in the security policies of different system owners becomes an issue. Furthermore, in the network layer, it is necessary to take sufficient security measures for wireless networks represented by the software-defined networks, or SDN, and 5G. Bot cleansing measures, which is listed as priorities in the midterm review, are primarily related to the device layer. MIC started a vulnerability assessment on IoT devices actually this month. Specifically, this vulnerability assessment consists of 3 initiatives and aims at assessing vulnerability of IoT devices by using a cyber attack observation network and vulnerability search tools, calling the attention of those who own vulnerable devices and providing information on vulnerability to device manufacturers. MIC will continue efforts of this kind in and after next year. MIC aims to construct a system that collects the results of vulnerability assessment and shares it with related parties, and to introduce a system that periodically certifies IoT devices newly manufactured and sold to meet certain security requirements. MIC is now considering the announcement of comprehensive IoT security measures, including countermeasures against vulnerable IoT devices, in October this year. within a couple of weeks. Specifically, the content is to reinforce measures in a total of 5 areas, with a focus on countermeasures against vulnerabilities related to IoT devices, followed by the promotion of R&D and security measures at private enterprises, human resource deployment, and international partnership. The most important thing in promoting measures against the vulnerability of such IoT devices is how to quickly establish an efficient system under a public and private partnership. In the vulnerability assessment I just mentioned, MIC is working closely with ICT ISAC members, including telecommunications carriers, ISPs, device manufacturers, and universities with expertise. An example of such security measures under a public-private partnership already exists. It is called the ACTIVE project for preventing malware infection damage. The project has made a database and shared information on malware distribution sites with ISPs by utilizing government funds. If a net user tries to access such a site, the ISP will issue an alert to the users. Furthermore, the project has made a database of information related to C2 servers. If an infected PC tries to access a C2 server, the ISP will block the access. The number of cases that cut off communications with C2 servers reached approximately 100 million during a period of 1 year and 3 months from February 2016 through May 2017, which indicates that these efforts have a great effect. The development of a system to share information such as information on cyber threats beyond the boundaries of the public and private sectors is an essential point of cybersecurity measures. Japan is no exception. With ICT ISAC, a leading example, ISAC have been launched in a number of industries, including the financial industry, electric power industry, automobile industry. From the viewpoint of further expanding and strengthening the framework of information sharing, the midterm review refers to the construction and operation of information sharing and collaboration networks. There are many issues to awaiting reviews, such as the granting of incentives to encourage private enterprises to provide information, a mechanism of exemption in connection with corporate governance, and the automation of information sharing represented by AIS. The government would like to give proactive support for the reinforcement of US-Japan ISAC cooperation, which has already begun partially. The providers of critical infrastructure serve as the basis for information sharing and cooperation in the private sector. In Japan, 13 sectors, including the sectors of information and communications, electricity, and railways, are designated as critical infrastructure. The government has been providing support for the formulation of security policies of the respective sectors, the sharing of incident information, and conducting joint drills. The further reinforcement of countermeasures, including the mentioned cooperation between ISACs, is necessary. From a critical information infrastructure protection, or CIIP, perspective, the government formulated a new action plan in April this year. The reinforcement of Japan's CIIP performance is imperative for the 2020 Tokyo Games, while the integration of operation technology, OT, and information technology, IT, is making progress. It is necessary to make full use of cybersecurity knowledge to set up security measures for control systems related to critical infrastructure. At the same time, it is important for stakeholders to share the idea of mission assurance, which emphasizes business continuity, and to advance security measures. It is an urgent matter to enhance the system for critical infrastructure protection. While more than 20 ISACs are active in the United States, there are only 4 ISACs in Japan. However, more active movements are emerging in this field as well. Telecom ISAC Japan was established as the first ISAC in Japan in 2002. Last year, it developed into ICT ISAC by adding members, including broadcasters, system integrators, and security vendors. Financial ISAC was launched in 2014, and Japan Electricity ISAC and J-Auto ISAC have been established this year. Under the circumstances, there are mainly three issues to be considered. That is, US-Japan ISAC collaboration, and the collaboration of NISC's comprehensive information sharing and collaboration network with ministries concerned, and CIIP providers, and smooth introduction of AIS. J-Auto ISAC has just started up in Japan. It will, for example, handle issues related to connected cars, which will create new threats while providing convenience. Not to mention the security measures inside a car itself. It is necessary that we all recognize that a car is a kind of terminal connected to the network. From this viewpoint, when cars are network connected continuously, measures against both the cars and the network become necessary for prevention of cyber attacks and unauthorized remote control. A tamper-proof system on the network is needed to ensure data authenticity. Furthermore, privacy should be properly protected to utilize data provided by cars. The 2020 Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics will be held in July 2020, and the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games will be Tokyo's second Olympics in history. While the IoT conversion of society is making progress, more advanced security measures will be required in 2020. According to the midterm review, a computer security incident response team, or Olympic Paralympic CSAT for short, will be established by the end of March 2019 to construct a coordination system with at least 200 engineers. Furthermore, a regular risk assessment of the operators of critical infrastructure has been made repetitively in 19 fields, because failures in the provision of services from these fields may seriously hinder the operation of the Tokyo Games. And the results of the risk assessment will be reflected in reinforcement measures. In this slide, I would like to introduce MIC's activities for security human resource development. As mentioned earlier, the development of security human resources is an important policy issue to be addressed by the government. Currently, there are 265,000 cybersecurity engineers in Japan, of which 160,000 people lack capacity. In terms of the number of engineers, Japan is lacking in 80,000 cybersecurity engineers. With the spread of IoT in particular, the area of business requiring security human resources is expected to expand not only to ICT-related companies, but also to other fields such as distribution, manufacturing, and services. Therefore, NICD, a National Research and Development Corporation related to MIC, established the National Cyber Training Center in April this year for the full-fledged development of security human resources. Specifically, the National Cyber Training Center is advancing a project with three pillars. That is, the implementation of cyber defense exercise with recurrence, namely CYDER, the cyber defense exercises for the 2020 Tokyo Games, and training for young cybersecurity engineers. Firstly, I would like to introduce CYDER. CYDER is a mechanism to build a large-scale virtual LAN environment where people can learn a series of countermeasures against cyber attacks. CYDER prepares the latest exercise scenario by thoroughly analyzing cyber attack cases unique to Japan. In fiscal 2016, CYDER conducted training for 1,500 people, and in fiscal 2017, training has been targeted for 3,000 people. The exercise can be taken throughout nationwide through the network, and local government officials and cybersecurity engineers of critical infrastructure companies in each region take part. Secondly, human resource development efforts are making progress toward the 2020 Tokyo Games. Specifically, a large-scale cloud environment has been prepared with a simulation system of the Tokyo 2020 official website and games operation systems in the environment. In the simulation system built in 2016, the red team on the attacking side and the blue team on the defending side have been exercising against each other for practical capacity improvements. Thirdly, SecHack 365. This is a project to train young engineers started in 2017, this year. This is a one-year cybersecurity training program for young engineers under 25 years of age by utilizing cybersecurity assets owned by NICT. A total of 47 young talents, including a 10-year-old elementary school child, registered in the project, are improving their skills under the fiscal year's program that will continue until next March. NICT's research and development activities cover a wide range of cyber attack observation, analysis, and encryption technologies. The Stardust is a recently announced project of a cyber attack inducing base. In order to study in detail the methods of targeted attacks, this system induces attackers into a decoy environment that simulates a real system when they break into the system and observes and analyzes their detailed attacking methods without being noticed. Through these efforts, NICT will analyze intruders' attacking methods that are changing on a daily basis and strengthen necessary measures. It is also extremely important to strengthen Japan's global partnerships as listed as one of the pillars of the cybersecurity strategy. Japan and the United States are exchanging views on various matters by taking appropriate opportunities, including the US-Japan policy dialogue on the internet economy and the US-Japan cyber dialogue. Through the policy dialogues with the United States and other like-minded countries, Japan will further accelerate the sharing of best practices in the cybersecurity field and promote information sharing and public-private partnerships. In multilateral dialogues, it is necessary to continue discussing the application of international law and rules and the ideal state of international norms in cyberspace in a step-by-step fashion. The Internet is managed under a multi-stakeholder approach led by the private sector under the basic principles of autonomous, distributed, and coordinated. As for the ideal way of data and services circulating on the Internet, it is necessary to aim for the realization of an open digital economy by keeping the basic principle of the free flow of information, while restraining protectionist movements, including data localization. Moreover, it is necessary to balance the securement of privacy and distribution of personal data properly under international harmony. Furthermore, from the perspective of international security, it is necessary to deepen further discussions on the application of international law and the UN Charter to cyberspace. However, with respect to the application of international law and the UN Charter, discussions at the United Nations have not been making progress. It will be necessary to promptly share recognition among G7 and other like-minded countries about the direction of future discussions and dialogues. I explained the current state and issues of Japan's cybersecurity policy. ICT, represented by IoT, has greatly changed our lives and society. The first stage of the spread of the Internet is approaching the goal, and in the future, we are moving on to the second stage of full-fledged social change to a data-driven society. The three elements of ICT, that is, convenience, security as a negative aspect, and privacy to protect individual dignity, are sometimes contrary to each other, and it is necessary to maintain these three elements under appropriate balance and maintain confidence in cyberspace. In closing, I would like to thank you all for listening so attentively. Thank you very much indeed.
excellent overview, an informed perspective on so many levels, and I think, as everyone here can recognize, your English is better than mine. So well done. Thank you. I thought I'd open it up with a few quick questions and then turn it over to the audience. So I'll have 3 or 4 questions to sort of go through. So firstly, some are points of clarification. So the ISAC, so there are 4 formal ISACs that are private sector driven in Japan. That's not to suggest that other sectors do not get the benefit of intelligence and information from the government or from ISACs. Just help me understand that a little. In the United States, we have 16, and there are about 700 underneath that subsectors. Quite honestly, we have too many. And if everything's critical, nothing's critical. So I think there is some benefit to focusing on the most critical, those that can impact public safety, national security, and economic security greatest. So help talk us through that and whether or not the ISACs are beginning to share with one another. So, because one of the dilemmas with cyber, as we know, is that we like to think of our world in a concrete, sector-focused way, but cyber transcends all this. So I'd be curious what some of your thoughts are there, and whether or not you're seeing automated information sharing, machine learning, where there's not a person making a decision in people speed when obviously cyber speed's pretty quick. So let's start with those.
Yes, thank you very much. And as I mentioned in my presentation, there are 13 areas of critical information infrastructure in Japan. And as I mentioned, there are 4 ISACs. But other sectors also have the system to share the information based on the industry association. But it is a sort of a passive information sharing system. ISAC is more active to share the information and analyze the threats. And there is a system to share those information across the different domains. There is a scepter council. That is the cross information sharing system across the 13 designated areas. But still, it is not an active function to share the information across different domains. So we would like to endorse each business domain to set up ISACs based on the experience of the ICT ISAC. And threat intelligence is another issue that we have to consider. And usage of AI, artificial intelligence, or machine learning is quite important from the viewpoint of threat prediction. Mm-hmm. So we just started R&D program to utilize AI to the analysis of the threats, and using the big data, for example. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that kind of approach is quite important to know the upcoming threats coming to Japan. So we would like to focus on that kind of R&D program as well.
Excellent. And I might underscore, we have a representative from the Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center here with us today, and she's doing yeoman's work. So when we talk about ISACs, they're not all created equally. The FS ISAC is probably the gold standard, along with the Defense Industrial Base, and we have a lot of the leaders here. But when you get beyond that, energy, then it gets to be you've seen one. There's a lot of variance in the capabilities. I'd also be curious, because you brought up threat intelligence. You know, there's a new entity here called the Cyber Threat Alliance, and that's the big ISP providers and cyber threat intel companies. I think it's fair to say 5 years from now, there will not, cyber threat intelligence will be a public good. In other words, right now it's very much a comparative advantage. I know X, Y, Z. I think we're starting to move to the point where that becomes a public good, whether the government provides it or whether industry, where you have frenemies such as Symantec and working together with Palo Alto Networks as an example to share information. How does that play out in Japan? Is Is it cyber threat intelligence companies the way it was here, who, by the way, are really behind, I think they've played a huge public service in that the only reason we can have the attribution discussion we've been having is thanks to the FireEyes, the CrowdStrikes, the Symantec's, and everyone who's making that public. But I'd be curious how you see that playing out in Japan.
Well, I think it's quite interesting to see what's going on in the United States in the context of a Cyber Threat Alliance. Because as I mentioned in my presentation, the new information sharing system is planned by NISC and the Cabinet Secretariat. That includes the players such as the critical information players and also the security vendors and the manufacturing companies. And we would like to get together those information to NISC to analyze those threats information, and we can provide those the result of analysis to each player. Mm-hmm. But it's still very difficult to find out the balance between a sort of cost to provide information to the government and also the benefit derived from the government to the private sector. So we have to make more concrete this balance of cost and benefit. And
I'm glad you recognize that. That's
to get a consensus so among the stakeholders.
You know, and I think those are all excellent points. But and I also think there are ways you can anonymize, so you're stripping means of collection or how you got it or modalities or methods and you're starting to see some interesting and obviously sources. I doubt any of that's going to be shared publicly, so I don't see that happening. But I do think that at some point there are ways to do that where you can tackle the privacy questions and you can tackle the I still hold important information and still find a way to share it for the greater good. One other question before I jump to the Olympics and the threat landscape, but I'd be curious, what information have you gleaned so far from the HoneyNet Stardust? And I assume it's by definition, it's not publicly, people don't know they're coming into a honeypot or a broader network. But I'd be curious what sorts of insights, and I did note on your graph that it said public and private, so it had government and industry, which I think is really thoughtful. So the fact that you could potentially be gleaning information from both entities. So anything valuable coming out of the honeypots yet, or HoneyNet yet?
Well, actually, the NICD has a variety of honeypots within Japan, and also with the collaboration of Asian countries, we have several honeypots in Asian areas as well. But it is a sort of a...
This is one big network, right? It's linking honeypots together, which is pretty cool. Yeah, it's a system-to-systems approach.
So that is quite important to analyze the threats. But it is a sort of a passive analysis of the threats. In case of the Stardust, we can monitor the every action of the attackers within the information systems. So it is a sort of a next step analysis of the threats. So we like to, but still it is the first stage development of this analysis tool. So we like to develop with the government fund to promote the functions of this Stardust. So that is the stage.
But so when you glean that information, it's very much with an intent toward not only steering them in a safe environment, but also to do some honest-to-goodness lessons learned, right? So in other words, you've set up that network to be able to do active collection of what the adversary is doing, to take their TTPs and get a sense of how they do their business. Is that fair?
Well, actually, to analyze the seriousness of the threats is quite important, and mainly NISC is playing a role to understand or analyze the level of seriousness of incidents.
Awesome.
And at this moment, we have 3 levels of the seriousness. But in case of the critical information infrastructure, we are trying to make more concrete from 3 stages to 5 stages. And in that case, maybe we have to share the information as soon as possible using the AIS or automated indicator system.
That's exactly what I was going to ask next. So
Okay.
you can incorporate that. Good. And I'm going to break my own rule. I've never had an unspoken thought. Sorry, but I was amazed at the specificity you were able to identify how. Firstly, the presentation in general, but your labor shortfall. From a workforce perspective from cyber. You look in the United States, the variance will be lots of zeros at the end. No one has a really good concrete sense for that. But you had great specificity in terms of what the shortfall was. And can break it out into 80,000 cybersecurity engineers in particular. Just one quick question. What about women and STEM? What about, it's a big problem here in the United States that we're missing out on a majority of the workforce, and quite honestly, in many cases, the superior in certain fields portion of the workforce. Is that a problem in Japan? Are you seeing women get into cybersecurity, computer security?
Well, when I was working at the
Writ large?
actually when I was working at NISC, the ratio of the women was about 10% or so. So, but
About akin to here.
quite better skills are owned by the women in the field of cybersecurity. So we like to endorse the ladies, the women, to come into this business. For example, NICD holds the hackathons, for example, in many areas, and especially they have several occasions to have the hackathon for the ladies. So that kind of a sort of event-like thing has been taking place, but we have to promote more the ladies to come into this market.
So there is still a shortfall, like there is here. One thing I've noticed, having hosted numerous hackathons and teams actually from GW as well, is you often find that it's the combination, those that have certain discrete technical skills and those that have human intelligence skills and those that have social skills, and it's the pattern of all three that makes for a successful team. So just for what it's worth, they don't just have to be designing apps and coding. There are ways to bring people into that fold. Let's jump to the Olympics. You've got the rugby World Cup, is that what they call it? Sorry, I don't really follow rugby, but I've been with the Aussies nonstop, and let me tell you, they talk rugby all day. But to get a sense of that could really serve as your sort of practice. Not to suggest that the rugby games aren't important, of course they are, but maybe that's also the bad guys are going to use that as a testing ground before they play and cause real damage during the 2020 Olympics. So are you treating it that way as sort of like there's an old adage, you're only as good as what you practice, you train as you fight as you train. But at the end of the day, are you doing anything explicit with the rugby games that you hope to be able to translate to the Olympics? And with that in mind, are you using that window to then build, you've got an Olympic village. You have a chance to build something from scratch. Is cybersecurity going to be part of the Olympic village?
Well, as you mentioned, the 2019 is a very important timing for us to prepare for the 2020. And in 2019, we are going to have the Rugby World Cup as well as the G20 meeting.
Oh,
so we have two
big one too,
serious, two important meetings are going to take place. So, so 2019, towards the 2019, we have to prepare the system of information sharing, and also we have to set up a CCERT for those big events. So, but we don't have enough time towards the 2019 and 2020. So we have to, in a hurry, to prepare and coordinate all the relevant stakeholders towards 2019. It is big timing or big chance to train for training, I suppose.
And also to see what adversaries may have in mind. So just like we use those as opportunities to learn, so do they. So I'd be very curious how you capture that and and bake that into the next level of planning. Because I think we all know cybersecurity is not an end state. It's something we're consistently learning based on not only our actions, but most importantly, the adversary who has the initiative. So just in the for what it's worth. And we have half an hour for questions, so I am going to continue yapping for a little longer. But the one question I have is, talk to me about the threat environment in Tokyo right now. I mean, people must have. There's a lot of anxiety here in the United States, but when you see a missile flying over, that wakes you up. So tell me, what do we need to be thinking about? And specific, I know you don't have the overall DPRK defense or emergency response capabilities from an active war perspective, but cyber is clearly going to be part of that conflict. In fact, it could be a pre-indicator. In fact, whatever you see, that may be the eye-opener that phase one, game on. So I'd be curious, talk to me about North Korea, talk to me about what you're seeing, and then most importantly, if there's anything you'd like to see from the U.S. In so doing, because I think I don't want to suggest we're running out of options, because you never run out of options until the game's over. But there are fewer options, and at the end of the day, if we can't get the Chinese to act, we're going to have a hard time getting certainly Kim Jong-un to act. And I think we can only send Dennis Rodman over enough times. So, I'll refrain from any bad jokes there, because I'm not a big fan. But tell me about where you think that's going.
Well, as a staff of the Japanese government, it is a very delicate issue to
This is your personal opinion. I'm not asking for official, no official positions here.
Okay.
No, but just on cyber.
Yeah.
Let's limit it to the cyber piece.
So, as recognized by many people, the North Korea and China is a sort of a serious threat in the cybersecurity field. And in this geographical environment, we have a great concerns on the cyber attacks by those countries. And in case of the China, there is no cybersecurity policy consultation mechanism between two countries. There is just one single policy dialogue mechanism of the trilateral, including the Japan, South Korea, and China. And this is a very delicate triangle relationship. So we would like to have the direct dialogue mechanism with China to talk on many issues to strengthen the confidence building between two countries. And also we would like to have the bilateral policy dialogue mechanism with South Korea to cope against the North Korea and in some cases in China. So that kind of pipe of the dialogue doesn't exist, and we have to be in a hurry to set up this kind of dialogue mechanism.
Now, that sounds like a great, important, and time-sensitive set of initiatives. And I might note that even if obviously any relationships with China has some complexity to it, but if you look at night, just look at a map at night of the Koreas, and South Korea is lit up, North Korea obviously isn't. Obviously, they're launching their attacks outside of Pyongyang, not just in North Korea, but in China and elsewhere in Asia. So I think there are other ways to try to influence that. And I might just note that on cyber, even if you have complexity and disagreement on certain issues, maybe there's a time for new sorts of bilats that are specific to these issues. In other words, don't let it get caught up in all the other sets of issues, but it is important. You have that bridge. I know it would benefit the United States if Japan had that bridge into China and elsewhere. So for what it's worth, I would urge that you redouble some of those efforts. Let's open it up to audience here. Please identify yourself before your question. So right here, and there's a mic coming. So second row. Mike, do you have your hand up too? You get the next question, and then we'll go back there.
Mr. Taniwaki, thank you very much for your talk. It's very enlightening. My name is Patton Adams. I'm with Accenture Security. I had a question about IoT. You pointed out in your slide that IoT devices make up a large part of the target space for automated attacks. Has the MIC or other components within your cybersecurity structure in Japan come up with a way to prioritize and categorize different aspects of the IoT landscape? For example, you pointed to different service providers, health service providers, automated cars, and manufacturing. Maybe dividing them up by market penetration rates or by impact to critical infrastructure, et cetera. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned in my presentation, MIC has started the research of vulnerabilities of IoT devices, and a huge number of IoT devices exist in the real space. So we just started that kind of research from the IoT devices owned and operated by critical information infrastructure players. And we are going to enhance that kind of approach to the control systems owned by the manufacturing companies or those kind of things. And home appliance comes a little bit later, maybe. But in case of the home appliances, we have to think of the boundary of the internal systems, I mean, at home, and the internet. So maybe some kind of connecting point exists between the intra-system and the internet. So we have the concept of the security gateway between this internal system and the internet. So we like to develop this kind of concept to IoT devices. That decreases the number of monitoring systems. So that kind of several approaches should be taken simultaneously.
And I might note, I mean, what's keeping driverless cars from driving is really not, it is some of the security, the technology that, especially in Japan, is phenomenal. So there are some cultural issues, but I think it's primarily a security consideration, right? And then when we start thinking about smart homes, smart cities, smart communities, I mean, cyber has to be part of that from an architectural standpoint,
Yes.
literally. The way we do software design, we need to get that together with architects, and that's where I think we have a chance to really make some progress.
Yeah, so let me add some comments on that. And well, when we started the research on vulnerability, I think there are three types of vulnerabilities. When we are discussing is the authentication vulnerability to come into the inside of the information systems, ID, password, those kind of things. And the second item is the software vulnerability. And the third item is hardware vulnerability, hardware Trojan, of those kind of things. And these three items are, interconnected with each other. And some kind of overall research on vulnerability is quite important. The coordination of those research is required. And so in Japan, we have a collaboration with the METI and the MIC, because METI is dealing with the devices, devices. So we are dealing with the networks mainly. So that kind of a combination of the relevant ministries is quite important to coordinate.
Excellent. And devices, and on the private sector
Yes.
side throughout the life cycle.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
great. Michael, and please identify yourself.
I'm Mike Nelson with Cloudflare, a web security firm. And I would add access vulnerability to your list there, since we're in the business of making sure that websites and devices can always get connected to the internet. It's obviously a problem. But I want to commend you and your colleagues for doing such a good job of engaging with other countries and learning from their successes and their mistakes. And I wanted to ask a multi-part question, and you can answer whichever part of this you want to answer. The first, as you look around the world, are there particular countries that really seem to be doing the right things? Are there any examples you'd point to and say they've really made progress? And you spent 2 days here in the U.S. Are there things that we're doing that you want to emulate? The thing I didn't hear you mention was transparency and disclosure, which has been a big part of the U.S. strategy. We have a cyber breach legislation in many states, which forces companies to let the world know when there's a problem, and that, I think, adds pressure to invest. So What have you learned in the 2 days here, and what countries are doing a good job?
Well, we have a lot of things to learn from the United States, and this time I had several meetings with the private sector people in this field, and I am now making a proposal for the Japanese companies to establish the information disclosure system of the investment for cybersecurity, but they are a little bit reluctant to set up this kind of mechanism. But in case of the United States, you have guidance developed by the SEC for the disclosure. And we are expecting a system to promote the disclosure of that kind of information of the investment for cybersecurity, and that kind of company should be evaluated in the market. And then this good circulation may take place. And this is closely related to the proliferation of cybersecurity insurance. If some appropriate investment is carried out, maybe the premium of the cybersecurity insurance will decrease. That kind of system should be developed in Japan as well. So we are still looking at best practices in other countries represented by the United States, and maybe we can find out some best practices in the European countries as well. So we'd like to continue this kind of exchange of information.
What
about breach notification? There is an incident and millions of records are exposed. Japanese companies have to report on that to their customers? By law.
Yes, actually, this May, the Personal Data Protection Act was revised. And if there is a serious case of leakage of the personal identifiable data, it is necessary for companies to submit that kind of information to the independent committee of the Personal Data Protection Committee. So there is a legal system of that reporting the incident to the independent committee. But in many cases, the criteria is not clear. What is a serious case? So maybe we have to clarify more that kind of threshold of that seriousness of the size of the breach of personal identifiable data. It is still remaining discussing point in Japan.
Not just in Japan. I think everyone's struggling with thresholds and the like, so that's a very good point. We had a question here, then there, and then we'll go back there. So thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Sean Naylor. I'm a freelance reporter. Could you please rank the nation-state threats to Japanese cybersecurity, both in terms of the number of attacks from those nation-states, and then also the quality of those attacks, the skill level of those attacks?
That is a very good question. Actually, when we describe the seriousness of cyber attacks in Japan, of course, the number of attacks is one, element to consider. But of course, the seriousness of damage or the kinds of attacks is another issue to be considered. And in case of the incident that we handle as a government, it's still the very serious incident and serious incident. There are two classes only. But maybe we have to do more detailed analysis or awareness of those, the grades of or seriousness of that incident. So at this moment, we don't have any clear criteria or considering points of the threats.
Would
maybe
you
I-
think and
Maybe I
Sean,
wasn't
know
clear.
You can't answer all those questions, but maybe any
the-
countries that are different than what the U.S. would rack and stack. So for us, it's Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. I mean, anyone who's got a military has a cyber capability for starters. So, but those are the ones that are most active, the top 5 on our list. Are there any other countries of unique concern to Japan that aren't on our list?
Actually, officially, we have no capacity of the attribution of the attackers. But many private sector people say that China and Russia
Are the
are the
top
major attackers to Japan.
Well said. Okay, gentlemen here.
Hi, my name is Yuki Imamura of the Washington Innovation Network. Well, Taniwaki-san, nice to see you again. Every year or several times a year. I have a question about public-private partnership. In particularly, ICT or IoT, to some extent, AI. There are many entrepreneurs coming into these areas, and entrepreneurs are popping up every day and disappearing every day. So, in your very well described protection networks, platforms, and policies, how could you monitor or bring them into your protection networks, while you may have big companies which are well connected to the government policies? Thank you.
Well, the Japanese government is in a position to foster the startups in the field of ICT, and but at this moment there are not so many startups relating to the cybersecurity, and one of the reasons is because they don't have any sufficient level of incident data. If they can use those data, maybe they can explore the possibilities to develop new solutions for the cybersecurity. So we are talking about how to provide those incident data to the public, including startups. So I think that promotes, that helps the startups to focus on the cybersecurity issues. That is one option, policy option, I suppose.
Great. There's a question here, and then we're going to go way over there. So, and then we'll go.
Hello, Frank Castellanos with Bank of America. I'm curious what your thoughts are, if you can elaborate a little bit more on the global cyber norms and cyber norms in general, and what work that Japan is doing to promote greater cooperation on that front.
You were talking about the international norms. Well, as you know, there was a discussion of the GGE at the United Nations on this applicability of international laws and international norms. And as you know, the fifth term of GGE collapsed, and with the participation of 25 countries. And some countries say that the international norm is more important than the applicability of international law. But it is not a right way, I suppose. The two issues should be discussed at the same time. The applicability of international laws should be explored among the like-minded countries. And at the same time, the international norms should be discussed to prohibit the cyber attacks on the nuclear facilities or those kind of things. So it is not a good idea to put too much focus on the international norms only. So this kind of balance of the discussion is quite important. But I'm not sure that the GGE collapse, and what fora is going to take the responsibility of this kind of discussion? I'm still wondering, and I have no option on this issue.
Do you see an opportunity for new types of alliances in this domain? So obviously we all struggle with how does cyber fit into existing and extant partnerships, organizations, relationships, and the like. And we don't want to create something completely new. But at the same time, there are some very cyber-specific new needs and requirements. Do you think that a few years from now we're going to see new alliances in cyber? I know from a U.S. perspective, I've testified on this a couple times, and I think there is a need, but I'd be very curious what your thinking is.
Well, I think the G7 framework is one basis for moving forward in this kind of discussion. But maybe it's too limited to
operationally and
yes,
not focused.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
other like-minded countries should be included in that kind of a new mechanism of discussion for the international rules. So more like-minded countries approach should be developed.
And I'd like to see a U.S., Japan, South Korea to get into that
Yes.
fold. So we had David, then we had here, and then we had there, and then over there. So, sorry. Let's go there then. Let's start there. And sorry, David.
Oh, thank you. Nice to see you again, Mr. Taniwaki-san. My name is Sakai Ra from FS ISAC. I have a quick question regarding the multi-ISAC communications. I'd like to know your vision of the between ICT ISAC, FISAC, and involving the JP CERT.
Well, in Japan, as I mentioned in my presentation, the ICT ISAC has a long history, and there is a collaboration between ICT ISAC and FS ISAC Japan, and that kind of collaboration has been, working quite well. And we would like to invite the other ISACs, J-Auto ISAC and Electric Power ISAC should be included in that collaboration circle. And in case of the United States, you have the ISAC Association. That kind of mechanism of association of ISACs should be developed as soon as possible with the trial to enhance the coverage of ISACs. So, because that kind of information sharing across the different ISACs generates the new implications or new information of threats. So we would like to continue this kind of trial.
Awesome. David, back there. Sorry, if you can wait for the mic, David. And then there, and there.
Good morning, David Heyman with Smart City Works. Appreciated your remarks this morning and interested in, given the conversation about threats and nation states in particular, international norms, and your concern running up to the 2020 Olympics, what is your approach to, or how do you think about deterring these adversaries? Do you have a strategic approach that you're contemplating or developing to look at how to deter adversaries from cyber attacks? Thank you.
I'm going to use this as an infomercial. We're hosting a big event with Northrop Grumman on Friday with Tom Bossert and a bunch of folks on that particular topic. So see us next week as well, but I don't want to take away.
Well, for the Tokyo 2020, the analysis of adversaries is quite important, and there are two layers of the detection mechanism. One is the run by the Tokyo Olympic Games Committee, and that is exactly the core system of the Olympic Games. And there is a surrounding environment, including the critical information infrastructure and the government agencies' information systems. In that case, NISC is the key player to detect and analyze the adversaries. And how to get the interaction or relationship between these two core mechanisms and the surrounding mechanism is under discussion currently. And we have to develop this kind of mechanism to share the information. Well, who has the responsibility to analyze the adversaries and those kind of things. So still, at this moment, there is a premature stage, I suppose.
Taniwaki-san, if I might just underscore, sometimes having attribution and you see the smoking keyboard 10 times and the adversary feels no pain, that has to be part of that deterrent effect as well. Instead of simply blaming the victim, we've got to shift the equation a little bit. I mean, if people robbed homes all day and all you did was call the locksmith after you've been robbed, that would not be an effective solution. So I think it's a broad set of issues and one we're all struggling with, but expect some in the executive order that was promulgated this past spring by the administration. It's demanding solutions and answers on that front in the U.S. So more to follow on that soon. So we had a question here, and then Rita, and then there. That's probably going to have to do it.
Morning. My name's Shireen. I'm a graduate student in cybersecurity at Marymount University, also an intern at Health and Human Services, Office of the National Coordinator. My question's around blockchain technology. There's a lot of talk in the industry about blockchain technology, how you can create silos of identity for authentication, as well as incorporating biometrics, more specifically behavioral biometrics. Is this something that you guys are thinking about or looking at all?
You're talking about technology of authentication, recognition mechanism.
And the role the blockchain may play in that. That's legitimate.
Yeah, for example, in Japan, there's a company of the NEC. They have a, they have a reputation in the field of face recognition, and from the perspective of government, we have to establish some kind of trust framework to coordinate different types of authentications with the one single authentication. That kind of system should be developed. Recently, we introduced a national ID system called My Number, and it is maybe the key sort of a trust anchor to coordinate different ID systems using many technologies, including facial recognition or other authentication mechanisms. So that is one challenging policy that we are dealing with at this moment.
You know, if there's anything that came out of the almost regular Equifax type headlines we're reading about, it is the password's dead. So, I mean, and quite honestly, a lot of our PII assume it's exposed. So yeah, and SSNs and whether it's OPM hacks, you name it. So we do need to rethink some of those issues. And I think that I'd be curious to hear more about My Number at some point. So that sounds like a good point. Rita, and then we'll have one more question there. So.
My name is Rita Galliano, and I am with Okta, a cloud security vendor. And I was just curious about the Winter Olympics coming up in South Korea. Does this provide Japan an opportunity to collaborate more closely with South Korea? So that's kind of the first part of that, which I would say is absolutely it does. But how does the private sector involvement open up that line of collaboration and give an easier and more natural way for these two countries that are not naturally, that don't have really a direct alliance for that collaboration, but I think the private sector, can you speak to how that might open up that or change the paradigm and allow for better collaboration and preparedness for your Olympics, right?
Well, with the emerging threat from the North Korea, maybe the collaboration between the South Korea and Japan is quite important in the field of cybersecurity. And there is a continuous coordination between two countries in the field of, for example, the collaboration between JP CERT and Korean CERT. That is the information sharing of the incidents. So that kind of collaboration or information sharing between two countries is working well, actually. But what I'm talking about is the policy level or government level, still the weak linkage between two countries. So we have to strengthen that kind of a government level, G2G dialogue. But in the private sector, that kind of collaboration has been working quite well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Thank you. And final question here, please. Actually, we might have one more.
Thank you. My name is Yumiko Nishizawa. I'm studying in Washington, D.C. from Japan. I'm a grad student here in D.C. I have a question about political side of cyber threat. Oftentimes I'm taking a cyber class at school, and oftentimes we talk about threats. Oftentimes specific examples come up about election, how like other countries interfere with other countries' election, try to interfere with the outcome of election. And I was wondering, now the Prime Minister Abe, there is a news that he's calling for a general election in October 22nd. So if there is any debate or measures that Japanese government is implementing or suggesting to secure the security of upcoming election?
It's a good question. Can I ask one follow-up? Do you have an agency that is responsible for detecting fraud or anomalies because in the U.S. we have the FEC, but it's not a huge agency that's ultimately going to be. But if foreign influence in elections, is there a lead agency for that in Japan? I don't know. I honestly have no idea. This isn't meant to be a curveball. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, actually, we are going to have a general election. Maybe we have to pay attention to those fake news or those kind of things. But some part is related to the cybersecurity issues. And some part of that dissemination of wrong information is related to the characteristics of botnets or other factors of social media. The echo chamber effect is one factor of that issue. And I reconsider which agency is in charge of this issue, but at this moment I don't have any specific idea. Maybe we have to consider as soon as possible when I return back to
It sounds like a homework item to me. No, in all sincerity, that's what caught us, because it's one of these issues that is in the seams. It's in the seams of everyone's roles. So we have very specific laws in terms of people trying to buy ads, but look, that was when we had big networks and not social media like Facebook and others that are making headlines right now in terms of how that can be influenced. So a lot of our laws are written for a time when the technology we're talking about didn't exist, and the influence of that technology was non-existent because it didn't exist. So these are really interesting. Pat, I'm going to let you have a quick one, and then we're going to have Barbara let you have a quick one. I promised to get us out of here in 6 minutes.
Pat Byrne, Europol Senior Representative in the United States. Just a question, you mentioned globalization of the threats in your excellent presentation, by the way. In Europe, we faced that across 28 member states. We were asked to set up a cybercrime center. Small countries, some with some resources, and bigger countries with great resources. We found the model that has worked best. It was the JCAT when lead countries took a lead, but we co-located experts from each of the 28 member states. We're very happy to have the United States on board within our European Cybercrime Center. And this combination of information sharing between operational people, not just the strategic side. What's your view on globalizing that? I know they have Singapore and you know, there's questions whether it's operating at full functionality or not, but this is really a global threat. And is there a case to be made to have international, the important countries like yourself that take the lead in this area, to foster and develop a global center along the model that we have done? And I'm not suggesting our model is the key one, but along that type of model where you put operational people that are at the coalface in cyber, put those together.
Pat, and you would also be open to Japan plugging into the Europol initiative, yes?
Absolutely.
Well, as you know, as you mentioned, in Singapore there is a center of Interpol of the cybercrime, and actually the chairperson is the Mr. Nakaya from the Japanese National Police Agency, and he's doing a very good job actively, and that kind of collaboration, global collaboration, is quite important. And actually, I'm not working for the National Police Agency, but that kind of collaboration is quite important in the context of cybercrime as well. So global collaboration or coordination is should be developed and promoted, I suppose.
And I might note that Interpol has its strengths, but it also has some significant weaknesses as well. So it's the execution side that I think is worth underscoring. Barbara, you've got the last word, last question. Thank you, Helen. Sorry. Coming.
Barbara Gruey from MITRE. You mentioned the proposal for Japanese companies to start disclosing investments, and it takes me back to a conversation we had, a number of us on a panel at CTEC last fall, talking about the difference between, in the US, how cybersecurity has finally made it as a topic for the boards of directors, where for years it didn't, but after Home Depot and Target and JP Morgan, boards of directors now have cyber as a key topic. In Japan, the numbers were really, really low. Are there things you're doing to change that so that boards of directors are finally seeing cyber as something they must pay attention to and take action on?
That is a very good question. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we experienced the serious incident on the Japan Pension Service. And at that time, executive people of private sector understood the importance of cybersecurity for each company. But they understand the importance in total or in general. So they don't know how. And so there is a gap between the communication gap between the people in charge, the engineers and the executive people. And we are talking about how to foster the intermediary, the middle layer people to facilitate the communication between engineers and executive people. And but it takes a long time to foster those kind of people. So information disclosure or cybersecurity insurance is a tool to make executive people actively move to strengthen the cybersecurity countermeasures. So maybe there is no single solution, but we have to do a couple of things to change the executive people's mind from cost to investment to increase the value of each company.
Well, that's a great way to end the conversation. Taniwaki-san, thank you for your time, for your commitment and service, and for your strategic vision. So please join me in thanking Taniwaki.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone. Great questions, and we'll see you soon. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.